Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere you've definitely never been, back into the dark, smoky stillness of a prehistoric cave. You're curled beneath a rough fur, the fire's fading embers casting orange shadows that flicker like nervous spirits on the walls. Your body aches from a day of gathering roots and outrunning whatever definitely too large animal you poked with a stick earlier. Outside, wolves howl. Inside, it's cold. But the real surprise: you're not sleeping straight through the night, and that's completely normal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how far and wide we all are across the map. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir awake a few hours into sleep. Not from noise, just because everyone does. The tribe snoozes in two chunks, what modern scientists call segmented sleep. First sleep, then a gentle waking period, then second sleep. In that in-between time, you lie still, occasionally mutter, maybe whisper to a neighbor. Sometimes you sneak out to look at the stars. It's quiet, it's normal, and wildly enough it might be better for your brain than our caffeine-chugging, phone-scrolling modern pattern. Historians still argue whether this split sleep rhythm came from necessity or nature. Is it just what our bodies did before artificial light tricked us into forcing 8 hours into one solid slab? Or did those long, violet chats shape our brains into the social creatures we are today? Either way, sleep in 10,000 BCE is no 8-hour luxury mattress commercial. It's survival. There's no schedule, no alarm. You nap when you can, you crash after long hunts, curl around others for warmth, and you wake at the slightest rustle that could mean danger. Or dinner. Here's the kicker, though: even in those muddy, mammoth-filled millennia, people were already doing a version of accounting. Early forms of credit existed, especially among small tribes. If you shared your dried fish today, you'd expect help next week. The very idea of interest may have started around this campfire, not in ledgers or coins, but in memory. Who owes who what, and when? A fringe theory even suggests early trade-based societies functioned entirely on credit before coins were ever invented. You help someone fix their hut, and months later, they give you meat. No interest rates, but a strong memory and probably some passive-aggressive grunts if they forget to pay you back. Meanwhile, sleep wasn't just physical. Prehistoric people dreamed big, literally. Shamans and elders interpreted dreams as visions, omens, or advice from ancestors. So, your restless night might turn into a morning storytelling session where your bear wrestling nightmare becomes a metaphor for an upcoming hunt. By the way, your bed, it's not a bed. It's a pile of moss, fur, maybe straw if you're lucky. You sleep low to the ground, the floor hard and cold beneath you. No noise machines, no blackout curtains, just the hum of insects, the crackle of dying firewood, and the constant threat of being eaten. But sure, let's romanticize it on Instagram. Sleep cycles aren't timed, either. No wristwatch, no clock tower. Instead, your body is ruled by firelight, the moon, and the seasonal shifts. Nights are longer in winter, so you sleep more. Summer, you're lucky to get a full cycle before someone's dragging you out to chase down a boar. The weird part is you probably don't feel tired all the time. Without modern screens and schedules, your circadian rhythm is doing great. You rise with the light, sleep in phases, and nap guilt-free. There's no coffee, but also number to AM doom scrolling rabbit holes about whether you left the stove on in another life. A recent dig even found evidence of communal sleep areas marked by fire pits and shared food prep zones, proof that early humans didn't just crash randomly. They arranged their space to encourage safe, restful sleep in shifts. Sound familiar? Like a prehistoric sleepover, minus the popcorn and with way more lice. You might find yourself dreaming about the future. Not metaphorically, literally. Imagine lying there, half awake in that midnight interlude between sleep phases, and thinking, what if I could build a trap that resets itself? What if I stored water for dry season? In a weird way, those twilight hours might have birthed civilization. And speaking of civilization, even before cities, there were patterns of exchange. You don't need minute coins to owe someone. Barter systems were deeply rooted in early kinship societies, but interest, that's the twist. The moment you realize someone gains more by waiting longer, like lending seeds today and getting back extra grain next season, you've stumbled into one of the oldest financial tricks in the book. Congratulations, you've just invented yield. So as you drift back into second sleep, yes, that was a thing for thousands of years. Remember that your dreams aren't just visions. They're processing systems, memory sorters, and possibly the first financial planning tools humanity ever had. Somewhere in the deep folds of your fire-warmed, prehistoric brain, you're already working on an idea. You just don't know you're going to call it compound interest yet. You wake to the low murmur of water channels and the buzz of cicadas, sweat already forming at the base of your neck. Welcome to ancient Mesopotamia, roughly 2000 BCE, and you've just opened your eyes in the city of your bed. A straw mat on a mud brick floor, your pillow. If you're lucky, it's folded cloth. If not, it's your own forearm. Either way, your neck is going to file a complaint before breakfast. Outside, the sun hasn't quite risen, but you're not alone in your groggy state. Others are stirring too, because the people of Sumer didn't sleep like we do now. No blackout curtains, number 9 to 5 south. Instead, their rhythms follow the stars, the heat, and the economic demands of the day. And make no mistake, even now, sleep bends to economics. You shuffle through the courtyard where early risers are already sweeping dust, and a priest scribes symbols into a clay tablet. This is where it gets interesting. That priest, he's not just keeping temple records, he's tracking debt measured in barley, silver, or livestock. And that's not all. Those debts accrue interest, actual, written, calculated interest. Historians still argue whether Sumerians invented interest because of necessity or control. Was it a practical solution to grain storage and delayed repayment, or a power move by the elite to keep everyone just indebted enough to stay cooperative? Either way, there it is, cuneiform etched into the clay. 1 gur of barley borrowed in spring must be returned with 33% interest at harvest. No, that's not a typo. 33%. That's worse than your credit card. Ancient Mesopotamians weren't playing around. And as you walk past a reed-screened window, you hear someone mutter about a neighbor's son being taken as debt collateral. Yeah, they did that too? Children and wives could be held if a borpa couldn't repay. Suddenly, that 0% APR for 6 months deal doesn't look so bad. Huh? Sleep, meanwhile, happened when it could. The climate was brutally hot by day and oddly cold at night. People often slept in semi-open-air rooftops to escape the oven-like interiors of their homes. But that also meant your rest was subject to night breezes, barking dogs, and the occasional neighbor's drunken lute recital. You might drift off around dusk, wake halfway through the night, pour some water from a clay jug, then lie on your back watching stars shift across the sky, that segmented sleep thing. Still very much in play, and between those segments, you might whisper a prayer to Ishtar, goddess of love and war, because dreams were her domain. Oh, and don't forget the insects. No screens, no DEET, just sheer willpower and smoke. Burning bitumen or dung in small pots helped keep bugs away, and yes, the smell was exactly as relaxing as it sounds. But let's circle back to those tablets. There's something bizarrely futuristic about the whole system. Credit transactions were formalized, enforced by temple scribes. You didn't just borrow a sack of barley from a buddy. No, you signed stamped an agreement that included the duration, the amount, and the interest rate. This wasn't primitive, it was calculated, bureaucratic, and eerily familiar. Fringe scholars even suggest that early Sumerian sleep patterns were subtly shaped by debt cycles. Seasonal borrowing meant that harvest time stress led to more interrupted sleep and more dreams featuring gods with balance sheets. Okay, maybe not that literal, but anxiety over repayment wasn't new. Here's a fun tidbit. Sumerians believed that demons could interfere with your dreams if you slept too long or too deeply. So, even your REM cycles had performance anxiety. If you've ever jolted awake thinking you forgot to pay a bill, congrats. You're participating in a 4,000-year-old tradition. And yet, for all this financial structure, daily life remained physically brutal. The wealthy might get full nights of rest, courtyards, fans, even slaves waving palm fronds. But if you were a laborer, sleep came in fits. You passed out from heat and hunger. You woke up to shout at goats. And if you owed the temple a tenth of your crop, you probably weren't sleeping well in any cycle. Still, you can't deny the genius. This wasn't just a civilization figuring out grain silos and irrigation, they created futures markets. Literally, contracts on repayment, sometimes for crops not yet planted. Interest was embedded in sleep, in labor, in dreams. And every sunrise reminded you just how many bushels of barley you still owed. As you drift back to your rooftop mat, watching the sky turn violet above ziggurat silhouettes, you think of the absurdity. You toiled all day, dodged biting flies, spilled half your water, and still you owe. You owe the priest, you owe the temple, you owe sleep itself. And yet, you'll rise again tomorrow, like the rest of to work, to barter, to dream and to track every borrowed seed, because somewhere on a sun-dried clay tablet, your name is scratched into debt. You blink gradually, this time with linen wrapped tightly around your limbs and the distant splash of river water echoing through narrow alleyways. Welcome to ancient Egypt. The sun hasn't risen yet, but already the air is thick with warmth, heavy and slow, like syrup draped over your face. You lie on a low cot, if you're fortunate, under a mosquito net woven from reeds. Though net might be a generous word, it's more like a stubborn suggestion to the insects. The Nile glides by in the distance, indifferent to your exhaustion. Its rhythms rule everything here: agriculture, commerce, even sleep. You don't go to bed at a set hour. You doze when it's dark, or too hot, or when the hum of the night lulls you into forgetting how hard the stone floor is. Egyptian sleep was polyphasic, too. You'd nap in shifts, catching a bit of rest during the hottest part of the day, maybe again before a long night, but good luck staying asleep. You're likely to be roused by a neighbor chanting hymns to Hathor, or the temple's evening rituals pounding out through the air like a divine drumline. The elite, oh, they slept better. Raised platforms, pillows stuffed with goose feathers, rooms cooled by servants fanning enormous leaves. Their dreams were another matter, though soaked in symbolism, divine messages, and anxiety about being judged by Anubis with a feather and a scale. No pressure. Historians still argue whether Egyptian interest rates were religious obligations disguised as loans or calculated economic strategy. Either way, temple priests kept meticulous records. They didn't just track who borrowed what, they tracked when it was borrowed, how long the Nile flood would delay repayment, and how much more would be owed in return. Interest was often charged in kind. You borrow 10 baskets of grain today and return 12 after harvest. That's 20%. Manageable. Maybe, unless the flood failed. Then you owe what you don't have. And suddenly, you're offering your services to the temple for a few years or forever. Let's talk about lighting. Your nights are lit by oil lamps, small clay bowls filled with animal fat or, for the refined, scented oils. But here's the kicker. Some lamps were enhanced with powdered crocodile dung. Why? Supposedly for protection. You know, nothing sets the mood for restful sleep like the gentle glow of flaming excrement beside your head. And yet, dreams mattered deeply here. Egyptians believed the gods could speak through dreams, and if you had a particularly vivid one, you'd hurry to a dream interpreter, usually a priest who'd analyze your vision using scrolls of symbolic meaning. Imagine walking into a temple at dawn, sleep in your eyes, saying, "So, I was being eaten by a lotus, and my grandmother turned into a baboon, and the priest just nods solemnly and charges you to fish for the reading. Sleep, for many Egyptians, was also a metaphor for death. The phrase sleeping the sleep of the West referred to the eternal rest of the dead. That's a comforting thought to lull you back to sleep. Right. Just remember, every time you doze off, you're practicing for your final nap, but don't get too cozy. The average person sleeps where they work in stalls, shops, or near the oven they'll fire up again before dawn. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by roosters, sandstorms, the occasional wandering donkey, and the ongoing anxiety of owing someone a sack of garlic or a goat you haven't birthed yet. Fringe historians suggest that Egyptian temples may have functioned like early banks. You could deposit valuables in temple storerooms and receive clay chits as proof spendable within certain merchant circles. And if you borrowed against it? Yep, interest applied. Your sleep wasn't just interrupted by the heat, it was interrupted by your debt-induced stomach cramps. Even children weren't exempt. Families borrowed heavily for dowries, livestock, land. If the harvest didn't come through, the whole household carried the weight of repayment right down to little Akhenaten Jr., who might be working in the granary by age 6 to help cover Dad's loan. Meanwhile, back in your cramped house, you've wrapped a damp cloth around your neck to cool down, but it's only marginally helping. The fan palm leaf on the floor is doing its best impression of being decorative. You drift into sleep again, only to be awakened an hour later by distant temple drums, some god's celebration, or maybe just another tax collection announcement. Either way, the message is clear. Sleep is optional, but your debt isn't. Some families kept clay tablets by the bed with small prayers etched into them, asking for peaceful dreams, restful sleep, and no joke, favor with creditors, the ancient version of a vision board, with slightly more gods and a lot more jackal-headed judges. And still, there was beauty in the way sleep fit into Egyptian life. It was layered into rituals, belief systems, daily labor. Even the Book of the Dead has portions that guide your soul through the dreamlike underworld, proving sleep and death were truly two sides of the same linen-wrapped coin. So, you roll over again, sweat tracing down your temple, dreams half-formed. In them, you're drifting down the Nile in a boat made of stars. You're debt-free. You're cool. A crocodile smiles at you. Then it opens its mouth and gently recites the terms of your loan. You wake up in a panic. The sun's rising. Time to work. Time to sleepwalk through another day under the watchful eyes of gods, priests, and creditors with very sharp reeds. You blink awake beneath a sky smeared with ink, somewhere on the Athenian hillside, the glow of distant torches flickering like sleepy constellations just above the rooftops. You're lying on a thin mat in a stone courtyard, the air cool, dry, and a bit smoky. You can't remember if it's second sleep or just another philosophical crisis at 3 a.m. Honestly, in ancient Greece, the two weren't mutually exclusive. Sleep comes in philosophical layers here. You're expected to reflect daily, nightly, eternally on your own existence. Which means yes, even your nap is a chance to prove something to Plato. The hum of the city never fully dies, even in the wee hours. Some sophist is probably still rambling on about the soul while someone else complains about interest rates. You pull your wool blanket tighter around your shoulders and try not to listen to the neighbors arguing about who owes whom olives. Again, and yes, interest rates are very much a thing here, usually around 10 to 12%. Reasonable by modern standards, but still painful when your vineyard got hit with mold last season. Historians still argue whether Greek interest practices were born from necessity, status, or a cultural obsession with balance and reciprocity. You borrow money, you give back more, not just because it's fair, but because logos, the divine order, demands it. The twist is that, in Athens, debt wasn't always shameful. Sometimes, it was expected. You might take out a loan to sponsor a play, build a ship, or bribe someone important in the agora. You'd be judged more for not participating in the economic dance than for falling behind on payments. Unless, of course, You fell way behind, then you might lose your land, your status, or, awkwardly, your freedom. You stir. A neighbor's goat is snoring. Somewhere above you, the Acropolis looms, and beyond that, Mount Olympus, where the gods presumably never sleep, because they're too busy meddling in everyone else's. Let's talk about dreams. The Greeks took dreaming very seriously. So seriously that they built an entire cult around it. The god Asclepius, lord of healing, had sanctuaries where you'd go specifically to sleep. Yes, sleep and await divine visions. Dream incubation, they called it. You'd purify yourself, fast, maybe sacrifice a chicken, and then lie down in a temple full of snakes, because obviously nothing says restful slumber like being surrounded by sacred reptiles. Fringe researchers suggest these dreams were sometimes medically interpreted by priests, an ancient form of psychological triage. You dream of drowning. Clearly you're having liver trouble. You dream of flying. Too much wine. You dream of being chased by a dead duck with your father's face. Well, that's a different conversation. As you lie on your back and contemplate going back to sleep, a dog barks in the distance. Someone's flute music drifts up the hill. You remember, you've still got a debt due to a friend's uncle for that amphora of wine you borrowed last Dionysia. Interest, 1 amphora becomes 1.5. It adds up fast, especially when you drink your assets. In wealthier homes, beds are slightly more comfortable. Wooden frames with rope webbing and a thin mattress stuffed with wool or straw. Pillows, optional. They're more a neck support than a plush cloud of dreams. But don't worry, the discomfort keeps your moral compass in check. Here's a strange thing. Elite men often avoided long nighttime sleep. Why? Because the hours after dusk were for thinking, writing, plotting. Long, dreamy slumber was considered indulgent, almost decadent. True citizens used that segmented sleep-wake time to read, debate, or pace dramatically in togas. So, you half sleep, half fret, caught between philosophy and poverty. Somewhere nearby, a student of Socrates is composing the perfect question to make you feel like you've never truly known anything, including how to get a good night's rest. And speaking of rest, debt laws were not kind. If you couldn't repay, your property could be seized. If you were a medic, basically a resident alien, you had even fewer rights. And if things got really bad, you could be sold into debt slavery. That's not just stressful. That's insomnia and sandals. To cope. Some Athenians used herbal aids, primarily poppy-based tinctures or diluted wine spiced with herbs like hemlock just a little. Hopefully, there's also evidence of sleep stones, smooth, cool pebbles placed on the forehead to draw out restlessness. Whether this worked is debatable. But hey, it's cheaper than therapy. You roll over. The stars shift slightly. You wonder if tomorrow's market will have fresh figs, or if you'll run into that guy you owe 2 drachmas to. Probably both. And somewhere deep inside, your philosopher's brain whispers that sleep is the brother of death, and that true rest can only come when your soul is unburdened. Yeah, thanks for that. So you breathe slowly, evenly. Your body is tired. Your brain is on fire. You try counting columns. Ionic, Doric, Corinthian. It's not helping. But eventually, sleep creeps in, not with warmth, but with the cool logic of a syllogism. You are tired. All tired things must rest. Therefore, you must rest. And so, for a little while at least, you do. You wake with a start to the clatter of wagon wheels on stone. Dust hangs in the morning air like a permanent guest, and your back feels like it spent the night wrestling a marble statue. Welcome to Rome eternal, sprawling, noisy romance sleep here. It's just another battlefield. You're crammed into an insula, a towering, rickety apartment block made of wood, stone, and what suspiciously feels like optimism. You're on the 4th floor, which is to say, you're as far as possible from running water and safety. Fires were common, privacy non-existent, and your walls are so thin you could probably recite your neighbor's dinner conversation word for word. You probably already do. Still, You managed to doze off last night sometime after the couple downstairs finished arguing about their daughter's dowry. You vaguely remember the sound of someone vomiting in the alley. Classic ambience. Sleep in Rome. In a peaceful retreat, it's a negotiation with your environment. Sleep patterns here are fractured. The Roman day starts early, really early. You were probably up before dawn. It has to get a decent spot in the bread line. That means naps are essential and common. Meridiatio, the midday rest, was practically sacred. Even government buildings paused in the afternoon for short naps. If Rome had had office cubicles, they'd come with built-in recliners. You stretch and look around. Someone's already sweeping the street outside. A cart full of amphorae is rolling by, and you swear that mule is judging you. But the real kicker, there's a banker down the street who's been open for an hour already. And yes, he charges interest, usually 12%, sometimes more if you look like you forgot your toga last week. Historians still argue whether Roman banking developed independently or borrowed, pun intended, from Greek and Mesopotamian systems. What's certain is that the Romans loved organization. Banking was tightly woven into commerce, politics, and, oddly, sleep. You could take a nap, wake up, and find your debt had been sold to another lender. Surprise. Oh, and if you thought today's creditors were aggressive, Roman lenders could be, let's say, motivated. There's evidence that failure to repay loans could lead to property seizures, exile, or even enslavement. And yes, if your friend vouched for your loan and you failed to pay, guess who's getting a surprise visit from the magistrate? Hope your friendship bracelet came with a legal disclaimer. Let's rewind a bit. Imagine you're a mid-level Roman merchant. You borrow 1,000 sesterces to finance a shipment of olive oil from Hispania. You agree to 12% interest payable in full in 6 months. No problem, right? Until the ship gets delayed by pirates. Suddenly, your dreams are less about dinner parties and more about dodging creditors with knives and excellent posture. Sleep reflects this stress. Romans often split their sleep, going to bed shortly after dusk, waking during the night for prayers, reading, or, let's be honest, more wine. That second period of sleep was sometimes the most restful, tucked between layers of fermented regret. Some nights, you're lucky. You wrap yourself in a blanket la cerna, if you're fancy, and fall asleep to the sound of lyre music in the distance. Other nights, it's the neighbor's baby, or the neighbor, or the rats. Let's talk bedding. Wealthy Romans had beds with wooden frames, mattress pads stuffed with feathers or wool, and sheets of linen. The poor, straw mats, maybe a bench. If you were a slave, you likely slept on the floor or in the corner of whatever room was least trafficked. And sleep was earned after cooking, cleaning, hauling, and enduring a day's worth of shouted orders. Dreams. Oh, the Romans were all about dreams. They had entire dream manuals. Dreaming of being naked in public. That could mean public disgrace or success, depending on the context. Dreaming of eating raw meat. That one's never good. Fringe scholars claim some Roman generals made strategic decisions based on dreams. One apocryphal story has a commander canceling a campaign because he dreamt of a crow perched on his helmet and interpreted it as divine warning. Others say it was indigestion. Honestly, with Roman cuisine, could have been both. Now here's something wild. You could sue over bad dreams. No, seriously. If a religious dream interpreter gave you poor advice that led to your ruin, there are records of people trying to hold them legally accountable. Your prophecy said marry the fishmonger's daughter and invest in amphor futures. Now I'm broke and she snores. Back to our sleepless narrator. You've got interest piling up on a loan for a horse that kicked its last 2 riders and may or may not be possessed. You try to sleep, but your neighbor's practicing poetry for the forum. Loudly, every stanza includes the phrase, "O cruel fate." Fitting. To cope, Romans used sleep aids, wine often watered down, poppy tinctures, or herbal teas made from chamomile or valerian. You consider sipping a bit, but remember the last time you dreamed you were Caesar. You woke up demanding a crown and got a very confused mule in response. By morning, your back aches. You slept, technically, but now you've got to dress, bargain in the forum, pay part of that loan, and try not to sneeze near the centurion who's convinced you're avoiding your tax. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll sneak a midday nap near the aqueduct. Maybe. Sleep in ancient Rome isn't just biological, it's political, economic, chaotic. You rest where you can, you dream what you dare. And when you wake, the debts are still there, patient, calculating, and entirely unimpressed by your poetry. You jolt awake to the cold sting of stone beneath your feet and the tolling of bells echoing across the hills. The year is 1237. You're somewhere in the damp belly of medieval Europe, and no, welcome to the age where sleep is dictated not by comfort, but by canon law. You're in a small village, or perhaps within the thick walls of a monastery, wrapped in a blanket so scratchy it feels like penance. The fire's died down, the air is damp, and somewhere nearby, a pig is snoring with more grace than you'll ever achieve. In the countryside, you're sharing a bed with family members. Yep. One mattress, 3 bodies, and a shared nightmare about tax collectors. In the monastery, it's slightly different rows of wooden pallets, monks wrapped like burritos in woolen robes, all awaken several times a night for prayer. Good luck reaching REM when God's got your schedule on a liturgical clock. Historians still argue whether this broken sleep structured around prayer bells ruined medieval rest or simply reinforced a communal rhythm. Was it holy disturbance, or a brilliantly segmented rest adapted to natural human cycles? Either way, your circadian rhythm didn't get a vote. Now let's talk economics. You're a peasant, and you owe rent to a lord, not in coins, mind you, most likely in chickens, grain, or labor. You might have borrowed seed from your neighbor last season, and now he's standing at your door with a hoe and a suspiciously polite expression. Interest, oh, it's implied. You gave back more than you borrowed. Or you didn't get to borrow again. But it wasn't all informal. The church itself acted as a sort of bank. You could store valuables there, receive loans, usually interest-free in theory, wink wink, and even pawn relics or sacred items. That's right, some people mortgaged pieces of saints to pay their debts. Sorry, we had to hawk St. Ursula's toe bone. Times are hard. Here's where it gets wild. Charging interest usury was technically a sin. The Bible said so, and the church agreed. But like many sins, it depended on who was watching. Jews, forbidden from owning land, were often pushed into money-lending roles. This made them essential and resented at the same time. You want a loan? Talk to Levi, but if you can't pay him back, it's suddenly a conspiracy. You roll onto your side, trying not to inhale the scent of mildew. Your wife mumbles in her sleep. A baby fusses, someone farts, the thatched roof creaks. Welcome to medieval nightlife. If you lived in a town, things weren't much better. Inns were noisy, with straw-stuffed mattresses that reeked of centuries-old regret. Beds were rented by the hour or the inch, and personal space, a myth. You might end up nose to nose with a stranger named Gert, who insists on humming Gregorian chants in his sleep. Fringe scholars point out that this constant disruption led to elaborate rituals around dreams. People kept dream books, consulted wandering mystics, and even paid coin to traveling friars to pray away nightmares. Had a dream about falling into a well. That's either bad weather coming or proof your soul's in danger. Either way, pay up. Yet, somehow, people adapted. They rose with the sun, rested when it rained, and lived lives of layered fatigue. Sleep wasn't something you got, it was something you fit around your duties, debts, and devotions. Let's not forget the nocturnal peasant party. That's right. After first sleep, many rural folk would wake naturally for an hour or two. During this time, they'd tend animals, smoke a pipe, have a quiet conversation, or scandal alert share a little wink-wink nudge-nudge intimacy. Monks prayed, peasants played. You shuffle to the hearth and blow on the embers, hoping for a spark. The room is barely warmer than outside, but it's familiar. Your only candle is nearly spent, the wax pulling like a sleepy snail. You take a moment to stretch, scratch, mutter a half-prayer, and crawl back under the covers. And yes, the church also lent money through monastic orders. The Templars, for example, ran one of the largest proto-banking networks in Europe. Pilgrims could deposit money in Paris and withdraw it in Jerusalem. All faith-based, of course, with minimal fees, allegedly. Interest was still taboo, but workarounds popped up everywhere. Instead of calling it interest, lenders might ask for a gift of gratitude or late fee adjustment, because apparently, if you just call it something different, God looks the other way. So, you finally doze off again, just in time for lauds, the next bell. You grumble something unholy, your spouse groans. Outside, the rooster gives the most judgmental crow you've ever heard. It's still pitch black. You rise, brush the straw from your tunic, and step into another cold, gray dawn. Your feet ache, your eyes burn, and your dreams already feel like distant relics. And somewhere, a monk is tallying your tithes, calculating your offering, and wondering if that debt you owe might be cleared, in this life or the next. You wake with the smell of spices lingering in the air: cardamom, clove, a hint of frankincense sand, the soft swish of a courtyard fountain barely audible over the hushed rustle of silk robes. This is Baghdad, circa the 9th century, and you're lying on a cushioned divan inside a walled garden, shaded by date palms and cooled by latticework stone. Welcome to the Islamic Golden Age, where knowledge flourishes, scholars debate into the night, and believe it or not, sleep is treated as both a science and a spiritual necessity. You're not groggy, you're gliding into wakefulness, your body gently stirred by the change in light, not the clang of a bell. For the wealthy, and especially the learned, sleep in Abbasid Baghdad is a respected part of the day. In fact, prominent thinkers wrote whole treatises about the importance of proper sleep cycles. A well-rested mind, they said, was better for understanding the Quran, balancing the humors, and, not incidentally, managing your business. Because yes, business thrives here, and so does debt. You step into a study where a student is unrolling scrolls on arithmetic and astronomy, while another recites from Kitab al-Kharaj, the book of taxation. It's not just theology that's booming, it's finance. Banks, or serafs, offer letters of credit, promissory notes, and yes, loans. Interest, well, not quite. Islamic law forbids riba usury, but historians still argue whether riba refers to any interest or just unjust, exploitative rates. The gray area has been vigorously explored for centuries. So, enter the workaround: profit-sharing agreements, service fees, delayed payment structures. Technically not interest, spiritually safer. Loophole: depends on who you ask. You stretch beneath a linen sheet embroidered with geometric patterns. A servant quietly sets a pot of mint tea beside you. No words, just a nod. The city outside is awake, but unhurried. Merchants are opening stalls. Scholars gather under shaded archways to read Greek texts translated into Arabic, carefully annotated with commentary and corrections. You, however, are still waking from a segmented night of sleep, followed by a daytime nap, the afternoon kailula recommended by none other than the Prophet Muhammad himself. Yes, napping is sunnah, not laziness, and in a climate this hot, it's common sense. You nap around midday to refresh the mind, regulate the body, and preserve focus for the long evening hours. And here's the kicker: those evening hours can stretch late. This is a city that doesn't sleep early. Scholars gather in libraries until midnight. Musicians play under lantern-lit balconies. Books are copied, ideas exchanged, and somewhere, a poet composes an entire ode to sleep while definitely avoiding his creditor. Fringe scholars believe that some of these late-night intellectual gatherings doubled as informal lending circles, trust-based loans, repaid in trade, favors, or influence. An ounce of saffron today, a barrel of honey next month, and if you defaulted, well, Public shame was often more persuasive than legal recourse. You wander past the souk, the bustling market, and spot a money changer's stall. Small bags of coins are weighed meticulously, contracts written in ink on parchment or palm leaf. You overhear negotiations. A merchant agrees to finance a caravan with a Murabaha contract. The lender buys the goods, resells them at a markup, and profits no interest, just trade, technical, elegant, spiritually acceptable, mostly. Still, the ethics of it, a subject of nightly debate. You can almost hear the voices now. Is that truly different from interest? But the risk is shared. But isn't the markup just a semantic disguise? And so on. Imagine Socratic debate, but with turbans, tea, and far better calligraphy. Let's shift back to dreams. In this world, dreams are profound. They're not only reflections of the soul, they can be divine messages. Interpreters held respected roles, often using tabir, the structured method of dream analysis. Dreaming of water might mean knowledge, dreaming of a locked door, perhaps secrets or spiritual stagnation. Dreaming of your neighbor turning into a goat, better keep your distance, just in case. It wasn't all incense and inspiration, though. For the poor, sleep came harder. You curled in doorways, under arches, in workshops, heat, hunger, and worrying pressed down like an invisible blanket. You borrowed spices or oil from neighbors, repaid in chores or borrowed reputation, and while you didn't pay interest, repayment delays could mean exclusion from the social safety net. Still, Baghdad tried. Zakat charitable giving was mandatory, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It didn't erase debt, but it softened the social cost. Wealth was expected to circulate. You might owe a lot, but you weren't left behind unless you disappeared. Now, close your eyes. Imagine lying under a carved cedar ceiling. The stars peek through the slats. You hear distant music in it, perhaps, and the low voice of a poet reciting verses about sleep, time, and the weight of unpaid promises. You drift in and out, your body caught between science and faith, ritual and rest. The city keeps breathing. Somewhere, someone is calculating a return on investment in the margins of a prayer book. Somewhere else, a student dreams of stars that shift like coins, and in your sleep, you whisper a prayer not just for rest, but for balance. Between soul and coin, between what is owed and what is forgiven, you stir under a heavy woolen blanket, the air crisp and faintly metallic, carrying the scent of hearth smoke and boiled cabbage. Outside, a rooster shrieks its morning alarm. You groan, stretch, and bump your head on the low beams of your modest Tudor-era home in 16th century England. Sleep, you quickly remember, is no gentle affair here. It's part survival, part negotiation, and very much at the mercy of your debts. You sit up slowly. It's still early. The fire's gone out, your feet hit cold floorboards, and you mumble a curse at the rat you just startled beneath the bed. If this is your first sleep, you'll be up for a while, maybe an hour or two before sinking into your second. This segmented sleep pattern still lingers, especially among common folk. You might pray, chop kindling, write, or, if you're lucky, share a few whispered words with someone before the day resumes. Debt, of course, is always wide awake. The Elizabethan period has no shortage of people who owe more than they own. The economy shifting from feudal obligations to something disturbingly close to early capitalism, and that means cash is king and so are creditors. You've likely borrowed to pay for seed, for tools, for ale, or let's be honest, that extremely necessary extra goose for last year's festival. Interest, oh yes, typically 10%, but often more, especially from private lenders, and while charging interest usury was still officially frowned upon, a 1571 law legalized it so long as the rate didn't exceed 10%, which, for many, was generous compared to the underground rates being offered by less pious entrepreneurs. Historians still argue whether the rise in sanctioned lending helped the poor or merely trapped them in spiraling repayment cycles. Was interest a tool for social mobility or a velvet-gloved form of bondage? Your landlord certainly doesn't care. He wants his rent paid in coin if you have it, or in grain, labor, or cloth if you don't. But late payments aren't just frowned upon. Miss too many, and you risk losing your home. And should your debts catch up with you publicly, there's always the debtor's prison. Yes, that's right. In Tudor England, failure to repay wasn't just shameful, it was criminal. You could be thrown in jail for owing as little as a few shillings, and once inside, you often had to pay for your own food and bedding. A feedback loop from financial hell. Sleep doesn't come easily when your liberty's collateral. Back in your cottage, you hear your spouse muttering in her sleep, likely dreaming of the tax collector. You've paid the hearth tax, the wool tax, the ale tax, probably, and you owe your neighbor for the butter you swore you'd repay after the harvest. Guess what didn't happen this year? And yet, there's structure. Even for the poor, Tudor homes are adapting. Beds now have ropes strung tight to support mattresses stuffed with straw or rags. Sleep tight wasn't just a cute phrase, it meant tightening those ropes so you didn't sag to the floor. Pillows, if you had them, were linen stuffed with feathers or down. If not, it was your arm or a bundled up shift. In wealthier homes, sleep becomes theatrical. Four-poster beds with heavy curtains shut out cold drafts and prying eyes. Servants warm the linens with hot pans. Herbal sachets are tucked under pillows, lavender, rosemary, or thyme to soothe bad dreams. Insomnia, take a sleep draft, usually wine laced with opium or ground poppy seeds. Sweet dreams and slight poisoning. Let's talk dreams. This was the age of Shakespeare, after all. Dreams are now dramatic, symbolic, and full of supernatural tension. People believe they carry messages from God or worse, from the devil. You dream of falling. Maybe it's your soul slipping. Dream of water. Might be illness. Dream of Queen Elizabeth. Be careful what you say and to whom dreams, like gossip, travel fast. Fringe researchers point out that certain guilds even had dream interpretations built into their lore. Tailors dreaming of scissors were said to receive good fortune. Millers who dreamed of grain going sour. Time to check your ledgers or your conscience. You stir again. Outside, your cow coughs somehow, and a cart creaks down the lane. You slept, sort of, and you'll sleep again after your mid-sleep rising ends. But your mind won't quiet. You owe pence to the baker. You're behind on your chapel tithe, and your oldest child has been whispering about apprenticeships in London, ambition laced with expense. Meanwhile, the gentry and nobility increasingly treat interest like a tool for empire. They invest in voyages, claim shares in merchant ventures, and leverage borrowed funds to amass more land. They sleep better on goose feather beds and political connections, but not always deeper. Letters from the era mention sleeplessness to mercantile concerns. In other words, the East India Company is late again, and the gold hasn't arrived. You pour water from a ceramic jug, cold and slightly gritty. The candles sputtered out. Shadows cling to the beams above. You lie back down on the mattress, trying not to roll into the dip your body's worn into it. You recite a quick prayer, half out of habit, half out of dread, and hope your second sleep will be more forgiving. But even your dreams feel taxed. A vision of a coin with no face, a faceless man knocking on your door, the sound of chains that echo in your head even after waking. You startle as the rooster crows again, more insistent this time. Morning is coming, and with it, new debts and old promises. Sleep. You had some. But you're not sure it was restful, because in Tudor England, even dreams come with interest. You awaken to the sharp clang of metal striking metal, a blacksmith's rhythmic labor, marking the pulse of your morning. Sunlight filters through oiled parchment windows, casting golden smears on the wooden beams above your head. It's the 18th century now, early modern Europe, and you're nestled in a creaking bed that smells faintly of dust, candle wax, and the worn-out scent of shared generations. You're awake, but you're already tired. The Enlightenment is dawning. Science is thriving, and yet here you are, trying to piece together a full night's sleep between the nagging of creditors and the sudden popularity of coffee houses, Sleep is changing. Slowly, the old pattern segmented rest with wakeful periods in between are still clinging to life, especially in the countryside. But in cities like London, Paris, Amsterdam, sleep is under siege. Candles are cheaper, oil lamps brighter. Streets buzz long after dusk, and your local print shop just started publishing scandalous leaflets at midnight, so naturally, everyone's awake to read them. You turn over in bed, mindful not to shift too hard on the rope-strung frame. You share the mattress with a sibling, or perhaps your apprentice. Depending on your station, privacy is still a luxury. So is silence, and then there's money. You took out a loan last winter, just a small one to cover repairs after your roof collapsed under snow. But the snow melted, the debt did not. Interest rates in this period are standardized and aggressively enforced. Around 5 to 6% is common in state-sanctioned banks, though private lenders charge more, a lot more. Historians still argue whether these rates encouraged upward mobility or merely widened the gap between borrower and banker. All you know is that your lender's handwriting is far too elegant for someone who ruins people before breakfast. You rise, wrap a shawl over your shoulders, and peek outside. The town is already alive, shopkeepers shouting greetings, carts rumbling over cobblestones, children chasing dogs through alleys. But beneath the bustle, there's an undercurrent of worrying. Everyone owes something to someone. Debt now is no longer a matter of survival, it's become an instrument of ambition. You borrow to expand, to open a second shop, to send your child to school, to outfit your ship for trade. But there's no safety net. If you gamble wrong, you fall hard, and then comes the collector. In some places, it's the bailiff with a writ and a sneer. In others, it's the bank's quiet letter warning of foreclosure. For the unlucky, debtor's prison remains a very real, very grim destination. And no, you don't get much sleep there, unless you count the cold, back-aching kind. You pass your hands through your hair, still fogged with dreams you can't quite remember. Or maybe you can. Something about ink-stained ledgers chasing you down a hallway that never ends. Dreams in this age are caught between mysticism and medicine. Enlightenment thinkers begin to interpret them as psychological residue leftovers of the day, scrambled and reassembled. Gone are the days of prophetic symbols and divine messengers. Now, you dream about bills because you're thinking about bills. Rational, boring, terrifying. Fringe intellectuals begin experimenting with sleep schedules. Some try polyphasic sleep, short bursts throughout the day. Others promote the new 8-hour model, claiming it aligns with productivity and moral virtue. Factory owners love this, workers, not so much. And yes, factory work has arrived. The early engines of industrialization are groaning to life, and with them comes a strict timetable that stomps on traditional rest like a muddied boot on a linen pillow. You're expected to rise before dawn, labor all day, and sleep in a block, no interruptions, no drifting into second sleep. Just punch in, punch out, collapse. Even your bedroom is shifting. If you're middle class, you might have a room to yourself, a real bed. Maybe even a clock ticking by your bedside, a constant reminder that sleep, too, is now being measured, quantified, scheduled. But poor or rich, no one escapes debt. You hear it in the way your neighbor shuffles when he walks, favoring the leg he broke falling from a scaffold he was only on because his boss needed the storefront done yesterday. The interest on his doctor's bill will outlive his grandchildren. You sip weak tea from a cracked cup and try to focus on something else. The birds, maybe, or the light streaming through the window. But your mind circles back. You owe the merchant who fronted you flour. You owe your cousin who co-signed the merchant's note. And somewhere, far above you in a house with lace curtains and oil lamps, a banker is sleeping soundly with your debt tucked beneath his pillow like a bedtime story. So you work, you sell, you repair, you write. You churn out effort like coins, and when night finally falls, you drop into bed like a brick, hoping sleep will wrap around you like a quilt and not a ledger. Still, there are moments of grace, a warm hearth, a loved one's laughter, a dream where you're flying over rooftops unburdened by gravity or balance sheets. You sigh, turn over, and let yourself drift. There is rest here, not perfect, not uninterrupted, but yours, until the dog barks, or the collector knocks, or the baby cries, or the thoughts come slinking back like stray cats in the dark, and when they do, you just breathe, eyes half closed, whispering to yourself, "Tomorrow, I'll pay it tomorrow." You wake to a mechanical hum beneath your floorboards and the faint hiss of steam in the morning air. It's the 19th century now, and the Industrial Revolution is in full, caffeinated swing. You're in Manchester, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe Birmingham, but wherever you are, the sky is gray with coal dust, and your mattress feels like it's made of regrets. Sleep, once gently tied to the rhythms of sun and season, is now bullied by schedules, sirens, and shifts. Time is money, and your sleep, it's an overhead cost everyone's trying to cut. You roll off your straw-stuffed mattress in a cramped boarding house room shared with 2 coworkers and 1 bed-bug colony. There's barely room to stand, let alone pace in existential despair. But that's okay, you're late for your shift. Again, this is a new kind of economy. Capitalism is industrialized, debt is monetized, and interest is institutionalized. You may be working 12 to 16 hours a day at the factory, but somehow you still owe more than you make. The company store sells you boots on credit at 20% markup. Your landlady accepts weekly payments plus a maintenance fee, and if you borrowed from a bank, expect 5 to 10% annual interest if you're lucky. Miss a payment, say hello to repossession, and don't bother hiding your pocket watch, they already have a claim on it. Historians still argue whether industrial era debt empowered the working class to climb or simply made them sink slower. Either way, your pockets jingle with coins that were loaned to you yesterday and must be paid back tomorrow. You stumble into your trousers, splash cold water on your face, and cram a crust of bread into your mouth. No time for dreams. Those belong to a quieter age. But oh, dreams still come. In fact, the 19th century saw a resurgence in dream interest, just with a new twist: science. Theories about the subconscious, fueled by thinkers like Freud and later Jung, reframe dreams not as divine messages, but as reflections of repressed desire, stress, and you guessed it, trauma. You dream about losing teeth, that's anxiety. You dream of drowning, that's guilt. You dream about your factory foreman falling into a vat of boiling dye. Maybe keep that one to yourself. Fringe researchers of the time begin experimenting with sleep hygiene, urging people to follow consistent routines, limit stimulants, and avoid heavy meals before bed. All great advice unless your dinner is bread and stew at midnight and your next shift starts in 5 hours. The lighting revolution doesn't help. Gas lamps, and later electric bulbs, stretch the day unnaturally long. Night shifts become common. Sleep becomes fractured, shallow, and optional. You finally make it home, fingers raw, ears ringing, clothes reeking of grease and soot. You collapse onto your bed, boots still on, and pray your upstairs neighbor in practicing the accordion again. Let's talk beds. Briefly, working-class homes in this era rarely had the luxury of individual sleeping space. Hotbedding, literally sharing a bed in shifts, became common. One person sleeps while another works, then they swap. It's efficient, it's cheap, it's a deeply unsettling metaphor for your life. Meanwhile, the wealthy are refining the art of rest. They hire sleep doctors, decorate bedrooms in calming blues, and install health mattresses stuffed with horsehair or rubber springs. They might read medical pamphlets on the importance of 8 hours rest while the people printing those pamphlets sleep for hours a night and cough up ink. Debt's reach is everywhere. Buy a new sewing machine on layaway. Miss a payment and watch it get hauled out the door. Mortgage a modest home. Fall behind, and it's auctioned off before you've finished your tea. Debtors' prisons are still around, though slowly fading. replaced by more modern forms of financial strangulation like wage garnishment and credit blacklists, and yet, you dream of freedom, of forests, of a bed that doesn't argue with your spine. You dream of silence, of clocks that tick without judging, of a life where interest is something you earn, not something you owe. You curl beneath a coarse wool blanket, tugging it tight around your shoulders, heart racing even as your body begs for sleep. Tomorrow brings more bills, more work, more letters stamped final notice, but for now, in this quiet moment, you let yourself slip into the velvet shadow of rest. Somewhere in the city, a banker is tallying numbers by candlelight. Somewhere else, a union organizer is drafting a flyer by moonbeam. And in between, millions of workers, like you, are trying to scrape together enough peace to sleep a few precious hours before the machines start humming again. Sleep, in this century, isn't sacred. It's scheduled, controlled, bought and sold. And you do what you can. You bury your face in your elbow, breathe deep, and dream of clocks that slow instead of accelerate, of debts forgiven, of mornings without a price tag. And for a few moments, you forget the factory bell. You forget the interest. You forget your name. All that matters is that you're sleeping. And for once, no one is charging you for it. You wake up to the soft buzz of electricity and the gentle hiss of a radiator. The mattress beneath you is springy, the sheets starched and white, and the room smells faintly of soap and old paper backs. It's the early 20th century, let's say 1923, and you're in a rented room above a small diner in a growing American city. The industrial age hasn't ended, but it's put on a flapper dress and learned how to dance. Sleep, meanwhile, is being rebranded. You glance at the wall clock. It's 7:03 a.m. You didn't set an alarm, but your body did, trained by factory whistles and morning shifts. You sigh, swing your legs over the side of the bed, and rub your eyes. The light outside is pale and dusty. You've got 6 hours before your evening shift, which means today, you're working on borrowed time and borrowed money. Debt, in the modern sense, has gone mainstream. With the rise of installment plans and mass consumer culture, suddenly everyone owes something. You've got a loan out on your furniture, a bill due for last month's electricity, and you haven't even opened that envelope marked important, balance overdue. Historians still argue whether this explosion in consumer credit was economic liberation or mass entrapment in velvet chains. But one thing is clear. By the 1920s, debt wasn't just accepted, it was advertised. By now, pay later became not a warning, but a lifestyle. And it crept into your bedroom, for the first time. Sleep is being measured in public. Sleep research emerges from the fringes into the mainstream. Sleep clinics pop up. Studies are published. Doctors begin diagnosing neurasthenia and nervous fatigue, conditions supposedly afflicting tired city dwellers who, like you, are being overworked and under-rested. Sleep becomes a sign of health, not laziness, but only the right kind of sleep. Deep, uninterrupted, 8 hours, preferably on a Simmons Buterist. You stretch and take in your tiny room. One chair, one dresser, one radio that cost you 2 months' pay and another 6 in interest. You bought it for the news, you told yourself. But mostly it hums swing music while you fall asleep. Not that you sleep easily. In cities, night has become the new playground. Electricity floods the streets. Cafes stay open past midnight. Movie theaters beckon with glowing marquees. Jazz clubs pulse with life long after your shift ends. The temptation to delay bedtime is constant and seductive. Sleep scientists start to take notice. This is the era of pioneers like Nathaniel Kleitman, who begins dissecting sleep cycles in earnest. The stages of sleep light, deep, REM start to emerge from the shadows. You don't know their names yet, but you feel their pull. You know when your dreams get weird. You know when you wake up more tired than when you fell asleep. But knowledge doesn't always help when the bills keep arriving. Fringe thinkers embrace hypnotism, magnetism, and herbal elixirs. Advertisements promise better sleep through chemistry chloral hydrate, barbiturates, and nerve tonics with enough alcohol to knock out a horse. Some of your friends swear by them, others swear at them. Your mattress is stuffed with cotton, firm but lumpy. You got it from a pawn shop, no interest if paid in full within 30 days. It wasn't. You're on month 5. Some nights, you wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, unable to breathe. Is it the borrowed coffee? The fumes from the factory? Or the rising panic that you'll never escape the numbers you owe? You're not sure. Your landlady says it's just nerves. Maybe it is. You dress slowly, pull on your boots, and check your wallet. $2 and some change. Enough for lunch and car fare. You could save it. But then again, your stomach growls like it wants to unionize. The irony is thick. In an age where machines never sleep, you barely get any. The 8-hour sleep ideal is preached from pulpits and clinics alike, but no one tells you how to afford it. Your boss says be well rested. Your second job says be punctual. The math doesn't work, but you make it work anyway. Dreams in this era become the playground of psychology. Freud's ideas take root, and now everyone's trying to decode their unconscious. You read an article last month on why you dream about trains. Turns out it wasn't about trains. It rarely is. You stopped reading halfway through, mostly because your train was late and you were trying not to fall asleep standing up. You remember last week's dream, though. You were floating above your city, watching people move below like ants. In the dream, you had no debt, no job, no body, just breeze and distance. Then you woke up to a bill shoved under your door. Your neighbor works nights. You hear her come in just as you're heading out. She's a nurse, or maybe a telephone operator, you're not sure. You trade yawns in the hallway, like passing ships in the fog. She once told you, I sleep in slices. You nodded. That made sense. Because in 1923, sleep is a patchwork. It's a gamble between shifts. It's a luxury for some and a brief necessity for the rest. And always, it's interrupted by clocks, by rent, by that gnawing sense that time itself is a creditor and your account is almost empty. You turn off the radio, lie back, close your eyes, and really try to dream of something that doesn't carry interest. The mattress feels new, but cheaply made. The kind that dips in the middle after 3 weeks and lets you roll into a pit of springs and beer's remorse. It's the 1950s now, and you're in a post-war American suburb, a tidy little 2-bedroom with a white fence and a mortgage bigger than your grandfather's entire annual income. Sleep, like everything else, is modernized, compartmentalized, and boxed in with matching end tables. You lie awake in your matching pajamas, staring at the freshly painted ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator down the hall. It's not insomnia exactly, it's something subtler. A quiet pressure. Like your to-do list crawled into bed beside you, curled up on your chest, and started whispering about interest rates. Because yes, the American dream comes with interest. 30 years of it, at 4.5%, that charming Cape Cod you signed your life away for. It's yours, eventually, if nothing goes wrong, if you don't miss a payment, if your kids' braces don't blow up the budget, if the transmission doesn't fall out of your Oldsmobile again. Debt is no longer whispered about, it's normalized, even expected. Historians still argue whether this shift into mass, long-term borrowing gave people genuine ownership or thus prolonged servitude dressed up in optimism. But in this house, with your catalog furniture and newly purchased television, it feels like both. You fluff your pillow and try to settle. The clock ticks. You bought it last month on layaway. Of course, it's chrome-plated, sleek, promises to never run fast or slow. You, on the other hand, feel like you're running at both speeds at once. Sleep researchers in this era are busy with lab rats, EKGs, and the earliest full-night sleep studies in sterile white rooms. REM sleep has been discovered. The stages are being mapped. Finally, Sleep is becoming a real science, quantifiable, trackable, dissectable. Unfortunately, knowing how you should sleep and being able to sleep are entirely different animals. You shift in bed, your spouse mumbles and turns over. Maybe they're dreaming of the atomic age, of pressure cookers and fallout shelters. Or maybe, like you, they're dreaming of invoices and decimal points. Dreams in this decade are demoted. You're no longer supposed to talk about them at breakfast. Not unless you want to sound unbalanced. Freud is fading, and Dr. Spock is in. The new rule: parent well, eat well, work hard, and sleep 8 hours. Keep it simple. Don't make it weird. Still, the dreams come. Vivid, jumbled, sometimes terrifying. You dream of sirens, red buttons, and mushroom clouds, of a faceless man at your door holding a clipboard and asking about your payment history. Meanwhile, fringe thinkers in California are experimenting with meditation, guided dreaming, lucid sleep states. Beat poets claim sleep is a gateway to truth. Corporate America, however, is more interested in productivity. They talk about rest like it's a fuel tank. Fill it up, drive harder. The average home in your neighborhood now has 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and at least 3 installment plans. Furniture, refrigerator, vacuum cleaner, all purchased with a handshake and a signature. The bank owns most of your house, your car, and technically your wristwatch, and yet, everything looks perfect. That's the trick of the 50s. Surface serenity. Magazines show smiling housewives, obedient kids, and husbands reading the newspaper in slippers. No one ever shows the stack of final notices hiding in the kitchen drawer. You know about those. Sleep, here, becomes performative. You tell your coworkers you slept great. You read Reader's Digest articles about power sleep and early rising habits of successful men. You clip out a column on dream interpretation, the safe kind, and then stuff it into your sock drawer before anyone sees. You take a sleeping pill, just a little one, not every night. Just enough to get past that buzzing, coiled feeling in your chest when you remember the car payments due and you're behind on utilities. Still, there's peace to be found. A cool breeze through the window, the soft creak of the house settling, the dog snoring at the foot of the bed. You let yourself sink half awake, half dreaming into the hum of it all. For a moment, the pressure lifts. You remember being a kid on a summer porch. No debt, no clock, no headlines. Just the chirp of crickets and a glass of lemonade sweating in your hand. You don't dream of that porch tonight. You dream of numbers, balances, deadlines. You dream of a giant ledger in the sky, its pages turning in the wind, inked in red, and still you sleep, because even in this era of perfectly pressed sheets and smiling bank managers, your body knows when it's had enough. You curl inwards, block out the ticking clock, and let yourself drift. The American dream can wait until morning, the interest in going anywhere. You roll over onto memory foam, the kind that promises cloud-like comfort, but still smells faintly of industrial adhesive. It's the 1980s, and your alarm clock glows red in the darkness like a digital scarlet letter. You're wide awake at 3:41 a.m., which has become your personal witching hour. No demons, just debt and microwave burritos. Your VCR blinks 12 o'clock, has been for months. You keep meaning to reset it. Welcome to the era of credit cards, Wall Street cocaine dreams, and sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. You're not just tired, you're economically tired. You've got a Discover card, a Sears card, and at least 3 more you don't remember applying for, and every one of them owns a little piece of your sleep. Debt now is plastic and ever-present. The average American family carries thousands in revolving credit. Interest rates hover anywhere from 15% to 20%, and the marketing says, "Don't wait, you deserve it now." Historians still argue whether the rise of credit culture created upward mobility or simply sedated the middle class with shiny distractions. But as you stare at the ceiling, the answer feels suspiciously like both. You sit up, wander to the kitchen, and pour a glass of orange juice from concentrate. Everything in this decade is from concentrate: productivity, success, love, sleep. Doctors are now labeling sleep disorders: insomnia, apnea, parasomnia, hypersomnia. There are pills for all of them. Valium prescriptions are soaring, and sleep labs are booming. You might not know the word circadian, but you feel it every morning when you wake, like someone hid you with a brick made of fax paper and Reaganomics. Dreams, meanwhile, have become something people chase or ignore entirely. Freud is back in paperback form at the airport bookstore, next to Cosmo guides on how to decode his bedroom habits and what your nightmares say about your ex. You had one last week where your boss turned into a sentient calculator. It kept spitting out numbers. They were your numbers: balances, interest, unpaid fees. You woke up sweating and reached for the cordless phone to make sure your bank hadn't called in the middle of the night. They hadn't. Yet. Your bed isn't bad. Really? You bought it from a big box store with 12 months no interest unless you miss one payment. In which case, welcome to 29.99% APR purgatory. You try not to think about it. That's what the TV is for. You flick it on. Late-night programming blares in Technicolor tones. A talk show host laughs. A car ad yells about zero down, zero guilt, zero responsibility. You mute it and stare at the static. This is the decade where sleep becomes a kind of failure. CEOs boast about only needing 4 hours a night. Sleep is for the weak, says the Wall Street crowd. There are entire motivational posters built around grinding, hustling, winning. You, of course, would love to sleep. Just one night. Just one full, uninterrupted, blissfully forgettable night. But between the 10-hour workdays, the side hustle you're selling stereo equipment on weekends, and the constant low hum of financial dread, your body has started to rebel. You dream in commercials now. Half memories, half jingles, double your pleasure. Wait, wasn't that your wedding song? Fringe thinkers in California are now going full new age. Crystals for better dreams. Binaural beats on cassette tapes. Lucid dreaming as a form of astral projection. You tried one tape. It put you to sleep, but also gave you a dream where your dad morphed into a floating Amex bill. You miss naps. You remember naps. Naps were for kindergarten. Now they're for people who lose their jobs. Your doctor says stress is normal. Everyone's stressed. The Cold War is still smoldering. AIDS is ravaging lives. The economy is rising for someone, but it sure isn't you. You feel it every time the mailbox clatters with a new final notice. Every time you lie awake calculating what you can skip this month. The cable bill, groceries, your medication. You fall asleep finally, curled like a comma on the far side of the mattress. And you dream not of oceans or forests, but of blinking red numbers, an unending ticker, a silent countdown. Even in your subconscious, you're paying, but then the static fades. You're underwater now, no clocks, no bills. Just the gentle drift of a place without urgency. It only lasts a few seconds, maybe less, but it's enough to remember what sleep used to be. You wake again at 6 a.m., another day begins. Another list, another cup of burned coffee. You don't talk about the dreams. No one does anymore. It's too vulnerable, too weird. You just smile and say, "Didn't sleep great," and your coworker says, "Same." And the world keeps spinning like a scratched record you can't afford to replace. You tuck in your shirt, step into your loafers, walk past the VCR that still blinks 12 o'clock, and tell yourself, maybe tonight will be different. You jolt awake to the glow of your phone screen. It's 2007, and your BlackBerry just buzzed with a new email at 14 in the morning. You glance at the subject line, quarterly numbers, urgent. You squint, sigh, and toss the device onto the nightstand, where it lands on top of your third credit card statement. Welcome to the 21st century, where sleep is officially optional. Your phone never sleeps, and debt no longer feels like something you owe, it feels like part of you. You're sleeping on a memory foam mattress now, branded with phrases like NASA technology and pressure relieving zones. You bought it online, 0% financing, no payments for the first 90 days. But the first 90 days came and went, and now the monthly charge hits you with all the grace of a lead balloon. It's one of 14 recurring charges quietly bleeding your checking account while you try to meditate yourself into dreamland. Historians still argue whether this new era of convenience and access has empowered consumers or shackled them in velvet. Because for every subscription box, there's a penalty fee. For every points reward, there's a ballooning APR. You earn loyalty miles on debt you can't afford and feel oddly accomplished about it. Sleep, by now, has been turned into an industry. Apps track it. Devices optimize it. Pillows come with embedded cooling gel and Bluetooth speakers. But still you're exhausted. You roll over, tap your phone, to new notifications, a late-night Slack message from your manager, and a reminder that your minimum payment on a personal loan is due tomorrow. You could have sworn you paid that. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it was the other card. You stop trying to remember and just tap snooze. You're not alone. In this decade, the phrase sleep epidemic starts popping up in news headlines. Doctors warn about chronic deprivation. Self-help books promise to fix your circadian rhythm in 3 easy steps. But the truth is, sleep isn't broken. Life is. You try everything. Blue light filters, white noise machines, melatonin, guided meditation videos narrated by a British man who says relax with such authority, you almost believe him. But the moment you close your eyes, the thought train arrives, and it's running late, over budget, and full of emotional baggage. You dream, if you dream at all, in fragments, emails that don't send, credit scores that vanish, someone stealing your identity not to buy a yacht, but to inherit your student loans. Fringe movements grow online, polyphasic sleep advocates, digital detox gurus, people who promise if you just opt out of the system, you'll rest like your ancestors. But they're selling courses for $499. So, you keep scrolling. In the 2000s, debt has evolved. Student loans are now normalized. Everyone you know is swimming in them. Mortgages come with acronyms you don't understand until the market collapses. You vaguely remember watching the news in 2008 while eating cereal and wondering if your bank still exists. It did. Barely. Your sleep that year. Forgettable. Interrupted. Measured in restless bursts between financial headlines and job insecurity. You stretch, glance at your partner next to you, also awake, also on their phone. You exchange tired smiles. Maybe mutter something like, "We really need to get more sleep." It's said like a dream deferred. Like that European vacation you keep promising yourselves. Or the mythical paying off the credit cards completely moment you'll totally get to. Eventually, sleep studies now show that our screens are a problem. Notifications, blue light, constant stimulation, but telling people to stop scrolling is like telling a drowning person to stop drinking water. You prop yourself up on one elbow, listening to the silence, or almost silence. There's the whir of your laptop updating itself in the other room. A soft buzz from the fridge, the mechanical sigh of the air purifier. Modern quiet isn't silent, it hums. You close your eyes again and think about debt like it's a second personality. Not the dramatic kind, just the kind that rides in the back seat and comments on your every choice. Maybe don't order takeout. Should you really upgrade your phone? You still haven't paid off that balance. You dream you're back in school, taking a test you didn't study for. But instead of math or history, it's about credit utilization and sleep stages. You fail. You always fail. But someone claps and hands you a t-shirt that says, "At least you tried." The alarm goes off far too soon. You silence it before the sound finished blooming. You check your email before even sitting up, 3 unread. One says, "We've updated our terms." One says, "Your payment has posted." One says, "You're pre-approved." You smile. It's the 21st century. You're always pre-approved, but never quite rested. Your eyes flutter open to the faint glow of a smartwatch vibrating silently on your wrist. It's 2025 now. Your room is quiet, softly lit by a sunrise simulation bulb that you programmed last week after reading an article titled, "Why You're Still Exhausted Even with 8 Hours." You slept, technically. The tracker says 6 hours, 44 minutes. Our EM was short, heart rate variability below average. You scored a clues in rest. Apparently, your own sleep needs a grade now. You sit up slowly, surrounded by a curated mess of tech wireless earbuds, meditation speakers, phone on the nightstand with 57 unread messages, and a digital assistant softly whispering, "Good morning. Don't forget your 10:30 meeting and your minimum payment is due today." Debt, by now, is no longer a surprise. It's a subscription. Everything in your life is financed, rented, or paid monthly. Your phone, your car, your mattress, your streaming services. You've got buy now pay later options for groceries and vet bills. And all of it comes with interest, tiny numbers that grow when you blink. Historians still argue whether this new breed of everyday debt is liberation or slow-motion suffocation, whether we've democratized access or just gamified dependency. But when your watch tells you your blood oxygen dipped last night, and your budget app tells you you're $74 over, you stop caring which side is winning the argument. You stumble to the kitchen. Your coffee machine greeted you 10 minutes ago via app. You don't remember telling it to? Sleep researchers now say caffeine too early will wreck your cortisol rhythm. But today, you don't care. You're not looking for optimization. You're looking for survival. Your bed, an algorithmic marvel that adjusts firmness based on your sleep phase, was purchased on a 36-month payment plan, interest-free for the first year. Then 11.99%. You're in month 13. You feel every decimal when you lie down. You check your phone again. Your banking app shows for buy now, pay later balances, 3 credit cards, 1 student loan you were told would be forgiven eventually. That forgiveness is stuck in legal limbo. Sleep in this era is a paradox. We know more about it than ever how to cultivate it, protect it, respect it. But we still treat it like a failed download. We pause it, skip it, reboot it. Sleep apps soothe us with rain sounds and whale noises. Smart beds cool our spines and track our movements. But the one thing we can't turn off is our minds. Last night, you dreamed you were floating through a glowing maze of icons and messages. Notifications hung like stars. Some you could swipe away, some blinked red. One said, "Final warning." Another said, "Congratulations." You couldn't tell which was worse. You read somewhere that dreams are just your brain's way of sorting data, that memory consolidation happens in REM, that debt shows up in dreams because it shows up in everything. You can't remember your childhood phone number, but you remember your FICO score like a tattoo. You take a deep breath and consider canceling everything. Closing accounts, deleting apps, moving to a farm, living off beans and hammock naps. But then your email pings 20% off your next payment if you sign up for automatic billing. You click it because you're tired of resisting, of fighting, of pretending you'll fix everything tomorrow. And that fatigue, the slow, sticky kind, is what really interrupts your sleep. Not screens, not caffeine, not notifications, just the weight of owing. You crawl back into bed for 5 more minutes. You tell yourself it's a power nap. You've read the studies. 15 to 20 minutes can boost focus. But it's not about focus. It's about escape. And for a moment, just a flicker, you fall back into a dream where you're lying in a cabin with no cell signal, no bills, no responsibilities, just wind, just breath, just a slow exhale that doesn't end in a payment reminder. You stay there until your smartwatch buzzes again. It's time. Time to wake up. Time to pay. Time to repeat. But now, let all that go. Close your eyes, just for a little while longer. You're not in a cramped dormitory in 1320, or a detritus townhouse in 1927, or under fluorescent lights in a sleepless office tower in 2007. You're here, present, safe, wrapped in this soft, quiet moment like a blanket. The numbers can wait. The messages can wait. Whatever you owe, whatever you're chasing, whatever didn't get done, none of it matters right now. The only thing that matters is the hush in the air, the way your breath slows when you stop trying to fix everything. Let yourself sink deeper into the bed beneath you. Let your limbs grow heavier. Let the hum of the room, whatever gentle white noise surrounds you, fill the space where anxiety used to live. You've made it through centuries of human worrying, ambition, and sleepless striving, and still, here you are allowed to rest. Imagine yourself lying on cool grass beneath a wide night sky. No alarms, no clocks, just the rhythm of the stars wheeling slowly overhead. Indifferent to interest rates and inboxes, the earth turns, whether you answer that email or not. You are allowed to exhale, so take one more deep breath. Hold it gently, then release. Let your thoughts wander where they will. Toward silence, toward softness, toward sleep. No matter what came before, or what waits for you tomorrow, you've earned this pause, this quiet, this stillness, and maybe, just maybe, a dream.